title of our lesson this morning is Jesus, the Great I Am. All that Jesus claimed about himself is true. Now, if we go back to biblical times and listen to conversations that took place back then, we understand that when Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, he was met, and I'm going to use the word resistance. I can't think of another word to use. He was met with a lot of resistance from people who did not believe that he could possibly be the Son of God, because they did not believe, they believed that a Messiah was coming, but he did not fit the bill. He did not fit the bill. He was not what people expected him to be, and therefore they did not accept him as the Son of God. And this morning, we have to understand that if we plan to go to heaven, when we leave this world, we're going to have to accept that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that he was born, that he lived, that he died, that he rose again, and someday, and I believe it's going to be sooner than people think it's going to be, soon we're going to be meeting him in the air, as that old song we used to sing. We're going to meet Jesus and go to heaven and spend. My mama said you can't spend eternity, because spend means it comes to an end. Eternity will go on forever. My mama said you can't spend eternity in heaven. You're going to live eternally in heaven, but there will be no end. And this morning we have a lot to look forward to. We were just up here talking a while ago about people that have passed on and gone on to meet the Lord, and the only thing you can do is trust and believe that they were ready to go when they left this world. And from what I hear about some of them, they were just almost angels. They were just really good people. But I didn't necessarily know them. That don't mean anything. I just don't know them. I can't make any comments one way or the other. But when we leave this world, the important thing is that we are ready to meet the great I am. I looked up some lyrics, and I was going to run them off, and I thought, well, I don't know. I could just play the song. And I thought, no, we don't have time, so I scratched that from things that I was going to do. When someone is traveling to an unfamiliar destination, he or she needs a faithful guide who has been there and knows the way. What do we do now when we go on a trip and don't know where we're going? On my phone, it's Waves. And I argue with it because it wants me to take roads that I'm not going down. I'm not going down that road. I don't know where it leads. I'm not going. Brian called me yesterday. They left Indian Trail, came here, went and had their Christmas with Larry. Then they were going to leave and go to Georgia to visit Katie's aunt. And Brian found a new route because his GPS took him, I wish Tebow was here, on Highway 140 something, like you're going, I think the way he was describing it, you turn off of 74 and go towards Morven is where I'm thinking he is. And he said, Mom, it cuts off all this traffic. Does that sound right? 145, thank you. What did I say, 141? Well, I'm only four numbers off. I got the 140 right. But anyway, he's talking about that, cutting it that way, and he said, Mom, it really takes off a lot of traveling time and a lot of traffic. And then he called me yesterday, and they had made it, and I think she lived somewhere right outside of Georgia, and I thought, did you fly? But he said, no, traffic wasn't bad, and I was picking at them because, they have small children. I said, how many potty breaks did you take? So they would tell me how many potty breaks, and then they broke to eat, and then they stopped for something else, probably gas, I don't know. But anyway, we follow GPS now because we go into places, and I like it because it says policeman up ahead. I like it when it tells me that because I ease my foot back just a little bit. Even when I'm not speeding, I just automatically take my foot a little bit off the accelerator. Or it will tell you that there's a car sitting on by the side of the road, so you can kind of be prepared for that. You don't run up on it and get shocked. But we like our little GPS. Once upon a time, you had to read a map. That was hard for me to do. I was trying to read a map one day, and it dawned on me I had it upside down. I'm never going to get where I was going. I had to turn it up the right way. And I tell people all the time, I have no sense of direction. You can't tell me to go north. Now, if you want me to get on number 1 and head north, I know where I am. If you want me to go south, I know where I am. Around here, I know what direction to go. And then it finally dawned on me one time, well, if you leave here and go east, you're going to run into the ocean. That's east. So I figured that part out. Then I thought, well, if you go so far that way, you're going to find the mountains. So I figured out where west was. I had to go towards the mountains if I was going west. And that was my way of learning a little bit about direction because I just don't have a sense of direction. But we should be using our Bible. We used to sing that old song a long time ago, I'm using my Bible for a road map. And I can't remember the words to it. I just know that somewhere in there is my last stop is heaven some sweet day. And if we plan to get to heaven, we're going to have to be well acquainted with the Bible and with the Jesus of the Bible. Because if we are not acquainted with Jesus, we're not going to make it in. And that is pretty plain in the Bible. But we need to follow somebody who has gotten to that destination and they have arrived safely and they know the route. You know, if you're riding with somebody that drives all the time, you just relax. You can even take a nap as long as you're not the one driving. You know, you can get over here on the passenger side and curl up in a little ball if you trust your driver and take a nap. And trust that that driver is going to get you where you're supposed to go. It says, what is your desired destination? One of the first things you got to figure out if you're going on a trip is where you're going. Because you can't do directions if you don't know where you're going. If we're planning on making to heaven, we need to know where we're going. Because you can't follow directions to a place you don't know where you're going. Unless you just want to just, you know, close your eyes over a map and just kind of drop your pencil down on it. And wherever you drop the pencil, that's where you're going to go. Well, if you want to do that, you go ahead. I don't know that I want to. I used to think that would be fun. I used to tell people I'd like to get in the car and head in one direction until I ran out of tank of gas. Nowadays, that wouldn't take long for some people. Run out of tank of gas, find your place to stay wherever you were in a nice little area, and just kind of sightsee and see towns and whatever, and then fill your car up and come back home. Just sound like a wonderful idea to me. Have I ever done it? No. Not intentionally, anyway. But if you got to know what your desired, let me try that one again. You've got to know where your desired destination is. You have to know where you're going in order to map out your way. And then you need to know the person that you're following to get there. Now, we used to go to Aunt Bee's and different places. We just load up and take a little quick trip. Or when we were little, we would load up. Everybody would cook something, put it in the trunk of the car. We'd load up in the car, and we'd go somewhere and have a picnic. You know, it didn't matter where. We wound up in the woods a lot of times. Uncle Gordon used to have some wonderful videos of some of us children when we were little. But you had to have somebody that was leading the way so you could follow that person so everybody winds up in the same spot, the same place, at the same destination as the people behind them. You've got to follow the leader because somebody behind you is following you. For those who are seeking the truth and the freedom it brings, Jesus Christ, the great I am, is the only reliable guide. He's the only one that we can follow and know that as long as we follow in Christ, we will make it to our final destination. Now, my destination, my heart's desire is to go to heaven. I wouldn't want anybody to follow me if I was going in another direction, because I wouldn't want to feel like I had hindered another person from making it to heaven and caused them to take a detour and go in the wrong direction and not make it to heaven. But this morning, as we're following Jesus, our great destination is to live eternally with him in heaven. Every other guide that you try to follow is a deceiver and a manipulator who will lead you away from the truth and into a jungle of lies. Other paths lead only to death. There is one way to heaven. Now, there are people out there who are preaching and teaching. There's any number of ways to go to heaven. There's any number of little sidebars you can go, or detours you can take around something and still make it to heaven. But my Bible don't support that. My Bible says you can't do that. My Bible says there's one way to heaven and only one way to heaven, and the Lord said that he was the gate. He was the doorway. He was the one that we needed to follow, and he is the one who will lead us to heaven. And we cannot get there, no matter what somebody may tell you, you cannot get to heaven without a right relationship with the Son of God. And people that are preaching and teaching that, oh, you don't have to do it that way, you can do it this way. No, you can't. Not according to the Bible. This way is going to lead you to destruction. You can only go if you follow Jesus Christ. That was the introduction. It says to ask y'all the question, and I thought, Lord, I wish we had time to do all these little things that they got in here. It says ask the questions to define, let me try that one again. Ask the students to define the word debate. You know, when we were in school, they had a debate club. I used to tell Hannah, oh, honey, you need to be on the debate club, because she'd argue with signpost that she was right. And she has to have the last word. Not sure where she got that from, but we won't talk about that. But there are different definitions. Different people would say different things, but the definition, according to this, is a debate is a structured argument between two or more sides presenting and responding to each other's ideas on a given topic. Now, we get into discussions, but if we're not careful, we'll get into a debate. The worst thing you want to debate with anybody is politics. Don't get into a discussion with people on politics unless you already know some of what a little bit about how they think, because some people get really upset about politics. But if you're going to have a good debate, you've got to have 3 people involved, at least 3. You can't have a successful debate without 3 people participating. You got to have the person that's going to argue the truth of a particular claim. Then you've got to have another person that's going to argue against that claim. And then you need a person who's going to judge the quality and the effectiveness of the arguments. John records a debate between Jesus and some of his opponents. As readers, we are to judge between the two and then decide whom will you choose. Whom will you choose to follow? Because if you read or you get into conversations with people and you debate, that's what it is. You get into a debate with people as to what is right and what's wrong. You've got some people that say, well, I believe you can do it like this. I believe you can do it like that. I think if you would handle it this way, but you need some facts to back up what you are presenting. It can't be 110% your opinion. You've got to be able to have some facts in there, and Christ had his facts. He had his notes. He had his Bible. He didn't really have the Bible. He was basically the living Bible. But he had the truth of God. And the Bible says he identified himself as I am. If you go back to Genesis, God introduced himself to Moses. It might be the Exodus. I might be skipped a book. You go back, and God introduced himself to Moses. Go back and tell those people that I am. I am said that. I am that I am. And Jesus Christ referred to himself as I am. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. You know, that's the way that you have to go. And if you're going to debate people, then get your facts. If you want to talk to somebody, and again, if you want to really get people upset, have a debate on religion. Oh, dear Lord, the things that... And some people I can kind of understand, and I say, oh, okay, I see where you're coming from. Other people I think, now what Bible did you get that out of? What verse? What chapter? What book? Because I have to go look it up, because you'll come up with something I don't remember ever reading. Of course, that happens all the time now. Stuff that I don't remember reading. I don't remember that being anything that I read. I cannot do the message in here. I got to have the King James here. Follow Christ above great leaders, gracious offer of freedom. That's found in John 8:31 through 33, and the only one that's actually in your lesson is 33. Excuse me. I still have a frog floating around. Then said Jesus to those Jews which believed on him, if ye continue in my word, then are you my disciples indeed, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They answered him, we be Abraham's seed, and were never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, ye shall be made free? They're wanting to argue with Jesus that they are the descendants of Abraham, and they have never been slaves. They have never been owned and in slavery to any other individual. They were born free. However, we are none born free, because we are born into sin. And sin will enslave you worse than any other kind of slavery is your slavery to sin. You look at people and you wonder, how in the world, what happened to you? In our society, it is, I don't know where they come up with words that they come up with. I was listening to something, I think on the news, and instead of saying that somebody was dead or had died or had been murdered, whatever the term would have been, they were saying he unalived him. I thought, where'd you get that dumb word? I meant to look it up and see if there actually is a definition for being unalive. Why you just can't say dead, I don't know. But you know, we're so funny, we say, oh, they expired. credit cards expire. They passed on. Where did they pass on to and from? Where are they going? But we can't say dead anymore. But the person was referring, and I think it was somebody that got shot and killed, but that part I don't remember. But they referred to the individual, and they said he unalived him. I don't know if that's supposed to be less traumatic for a child. I don't. It went right over my head. Well, you look at some of the words that have been added. We unalive people. You can't say people are going hungry. There is oh Lord, the word just went right out my head. Food insecurities. People have food insecurities. No, they're going hungry. They're going hungry. But some of the terminology that people are using now and throwing it in there, I think, okay, but where did it come from? Now, anybody who spends a little bit of time with me will tell you there's certain things that get my dander up. When an adult says it's been a minute, I look at you and wonder what prison you've been in, because that's the first place I ever heard that term was in prison. Yeah, well, it's been a minute. No, a minute is 60 seconds by anybody's definition. A minute is 60. You're not the only one I've had that discussion with. A minute is 60 seconds. It's not 6 months ago. It's not 4 years ago. It is a set 60 seconds is a minute. And people that will say, oh, I've been conversating with so-and-so. Conversation means you're talking to somebody and you converse with that individual. But I'm afraid to look up conversating, because by now they probably have put it in the dictionary as a word. It's not a word. It is not a word. Just because people say it don't make it right. And I was not that good in English. Believe you me, Miss Crosland just had a terrible time with some of us in senior English. But it says that here in verse 31 begins with Jesus inviting those Jewish people who claim to believe in him to follow him. If you're going to say, I believe Jesus Christ, I claim him as my personal Savior, then you need to be following the footsteps of Jesus. And we get that from the Bible. I meant to go ahead and get my, I tell y'all all the time, I don't make New Year's resolutions anymore because I don't keep them. I set goals for the new year. And one of my goals for the upcoming year, I haven't written them down yet, but it's going to be to spend more time in prayer and meditation and get deeper and deeper into my relationship with the Lord, because in the end, that's all you're going to have. I don't care how much money you've got, you can't take it with you. I don't care what you own. When you draw your last breath when you are unalive, none of that stuff is going to mean anything. The only thing that matters is going to be that relationship with Jesus Christ. And it is something you have to work at. Now, I failed marriage, but my understanding of marriage is you got to work hard at it. It ain't the easiest thing you've ever done. We're not all so easy to get along with. Some people are impossible to get along with. But if you're going to be successful, then that's what you learn to do. If you have a job, if you work, you may work with some people that get on, as we used to say, on the last nerve you got showing. But you got to get along with them because you got to work with them. You're going to need them. These are things that we have to learn. And then if we set our life and we pattern ourselves after Jesus Christ, these things are easier. It's easier. It's easier to be a little bit forgiven to other people when you realize what the Lord forgave you of. If you stop and think what kind of forgiveness you had to have, then you're a little bit quicker to forgive somebody who has done something to offend you, to hurt you, to do whatever. Then it gets a little easier to have that little forgiveness inside your heart. In his teaching, Jesus revealed or uncovered the sin of humanity. As the Word became flesh, he revealed God's unconditional love, grace, and his uncompromising truth. God does not lie. If he said it, then that's the way it is. You can't change it. You can argue all you want to. You can go out there and you can stand people down that the sky is green and the grass is blue. But it's not. Now, they say that Kentucky has bluegrass, but the only thing up there that's bluegrass to me was the music. I never saw no bluegrass when I was in Kentucky. It's just as green as it could be. Thank you. won't allow me to say suicide, killed, or what?
They're not allowed to. Filters block out the word suicide, kill, and death. So social media influencers don't lie. We get past the filters.
We learned something. Yay, we learned something. Now we know where that word came from. Every word has an origin. So now we know where that one originated. Please don't look up anymore. You hear these things and I go, huh? I think I heard it wrong. And that's like I say, the first time I heard the word food insecurities, I thought, what does that mean? And I had to ponder it, as people would say. I pondered it, and I figured out it meant they're going hungry. They don't have enough food. But food insecurity didn't, my sister would say, did not compute in my brain because it didn't make any sense to me, and it has to make a little bit of sense in my world. It may not make any sense in your world, but it has to make sense in my world for me to be able to handle it. But to be free, a person must first recognize and acknowledge his slavery to sin, and in doing so, he recognizes his need for God. We have to understand that we were born into a world of sin, and sin separates us from the presence of God. And if we are going to reestablish that relationship with God, then we have to give up the sin, because my Bible says God cannot look on sin. So you have to have that relationship with Jesus Christ, because the Bible also says that you can't go through the Father except by the Son. You know, there are no back doors at God's house. You go in the front door. Now, if you grew up out here where we did, nobody ever went in the front door. Now, you did at our house. I don't know why. But everywhere else, just about, you went in the back door. Susie's, I don't know that I ever went in the front door of your grandma's house until after she died. Nobody ever went in the front door at my grandma's house. You went in the back door. I'm not sure you could open the front door at Uncle Gordon's even now, because that door's never been used. You go in the back door. Front door at the preacher's house? Oh, the preacher comes in the front door. I was fixing to say, the only time I've ever been in the parsonage, I think I went in this door over here. Your grandma's house. Y'all should have known her grandma. You took your shoes off before you went in her house. And honestly, you could have sat down and ate off the floor. It was so clean. But you did not walk in her house with shoes on your feet. Your dirty little shoes stayed outside. It was something else. And my grandma weren't quite that bad, but she wasn't far behind it. There was a crisis in leadership among the Jewish people during the ministry of Jesus, and this is illustrated by John's gospel in the story of Nicodemus. Even a Pharisee and a member of the Sanhedrin like Nicodemus, who was sympathetic to Jesus, could not see the truth because they were blinded by sin. Jesus characterized the Pharisees as the blind leading the blind, both of whom would fall in a ditch. And today we still have people out there, the blind are leading the blind. Spiritually speaking, we're not talking about blind people. We're talking about people who are spiritually blind and refuse to see the truth. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man cometh unto the Father but by me. That's John 14:6. By abiding in his word, a person learns the truth that liberates him from the lies and the false promises of the world's leaders. I don't care how good a politician is trying to be, and we ain't doing politics, Lord knows. But I don't care how good they try to be, or how much they think they can accomplish, or how much they think they can do it this way. They make promises they cannot keep. It's impossible to keep some of the political promises that people make. But when the Lord promises something, that promise is kept. If Christ said it's going to be this way, that's the way it's going to be. And our life gets so much easier if we just follow the Lord and follow the leading and understand what Jesus did for us when he died on the cross. This is an undeniable reality of bondage. That's John 34:40. Jesus said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever committed a sin is a servant of sin. And the servant abideth not in the house forever, but the Son abideth ever. If the Son therefore shall make you free, you shall be free indeed. I know that you all are Abraham's seed, but you seek to kill me, because my word hath no place in you. I speak that which I have seen with my father, and ye do that which you have seen of your father. They answered and said unto him, Abraham is our father. Jesus said unto him, if ye were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man that have told you the truth, which I have heard of God. This did not Abraham. As the descendants of Abraham, they adamantly denied that they were ever slaves. These people were descendants of Abraham. They were born free. They were free. And in their minds, they would never have been and never would be a slave. However, they're not looking from the spiritual aspect. We are all slaves to sin. Until we turn that sin over to Jesus Christ, we are slaves to sin. And when we think about these things, the first thing that pops into anybody's mind, or at least in my little pea-sized brain, what I think of first is people who are addicted to drugs. And they can't give them up on their own. And it destroys their life. Half the little fellers, and I call them little fellers because I worked on the youthful side at Morrison with the young offenders, the majority of them were there because of drugs. They got caught stealing, and they were stealing to support their habit. A lot of them, and I looked up some statistics, and we don't have time to do all that, but statistically speaking, kids who get into trouble are, one, there's no father at the house. Messes their entire lives off. You know, fathers need to stay home and be responsible for their children. If you're not going to raise a child, don't have them. Two, no father is there, so they drop out of school. There's nobody there to encourage them to finish school, or they quit school because of lack of funds and money. These are the kids that wind up in trouble, and they're in prison when they're 19 and 20 years old, because usually it's drugs, and they're stealing to support their habit or to help support somebody else's habit. And they ruin their entire lives because they were a servant to that sin. You know, and you can get addicted to all kind of things. You know, there's no point in going in through all that. But Jesus was establishing the truth on which Paul would elaborate in his letter to the Romans, humanity's undeniable bondage to sin and humanity's stubborn attempts at self-justification. If you ever got into a conversation with a person and they got to justify everything they do, I always wonder, you know, what kind of guilty conscience do you have? That everything you do, you've got to justify. If I said it, I said it. And that's usually, I don't give you too many reasons why I did it. I just did it because it's me and that's what I wanted to do. And I recognize my faults and my failures, and me and the Lord's working on them. So y'all don't worry about it. You can just pray for me, but don't worry about it. Me and the Lord are working on it. The Jewish people in this passage were blinded, by their pride in being a physical descendant of Abraham. Most of us are a little bit proud of the people that we descended from. You know, people ask me, I got into a conversation with somebody, and I said, are you so-and-so and such and such? And they said, yes, who are you? I said, I'm one of them Dixons from down there in Hamlet. I've never been a Dixon in my life. You know, I'm not a Dixon. But I am a direct descendant of those Dixons, and I'm proud of most of the time. Every once in a while, we probably fall off the wagon a little bit. But you're proud of who you are. You're proud of who you descended from. You are proud that your parents boosted up a little bit more. Every generation, and I say this all the time, every generation wants their children to have more than they had. They want their children not to have to work as hard as they did. They want to give their children everything. Well, after a while, there's nothing left to give your kids. You gave them everything. You know, I think, what y'all going to do next year? What you going to do next year? You know, what are you going to top it off with next year? You know, you don't want your kids to have to work. I think everybody should work. I don't care if you got $1 gazillion. If you're healthy and young enough and whatever, I think you ought to work. I just think people ought to work. I don't know why I've always been that way. I think you ought to have a job. It drives me crazy that I no longer have one. It makes you feel unnecessary. When you don't have a job to go to, you feel unnecessary and no longer a youthful person. Not youthful, useful. But Jesus was the true descendant of Abraham, and as such, he was the son who abides in the house forever. I just read you that. In other words, he was the only heir to the promises made to Abraham by God. Jesus acknowledged that in one sense the Jewish people were the ethnic descendants of Abraham, but this fact was multiplied nullified by their desire to kill him. If they wanted to get rid of Jesus, then they could not be the true descendants, spiritually speaking, of Abraham. Jesus then told them that the true mark of the children of Abraham was to do the same works that he did. Abraham's works were the same as God's works, which meant faith in Christ. That would have been found in chapter 6 and verse 29, which I think was last week. Jesus was anticipating the claim that Abraham rejoiced because he saw the day of Christ appearing. However, these so-called Jewish believers of Jesus could not be the true descendants or the true children of Abraham, because instead of rejoicing at Jesus' appearance, they sought to kill him. Here is the Messiah that Abraham talked about, that Abraham dreamed about. He was all the way back in the Old Testament. If you go back in the beginning, the Bible says in the beginning was the Word. The Word is Jesus Christ. It doesn't matter if you read it in Genesis or Revelation, you're going to find Jesus. You can go in the middle of the Bible if you want to and open it up and you're going to find Jesus. Every chapter, every verse, every line is going to refer you to Jesus if you read the Bible as it was meant to be understood. It says in here, what a contrast between Jesus and many of our leaders today. Lord, have mercy, don't get me started. Can you imagine if people in office truly followed the teachings of Jesus Christ? What a wonderful world this would be. If people that we elect, and you see what I said, we elected them. If the people that we elect truthfully followed Jesus Christ, what a wonderful time we would have. Can you imagine if the news said, oh, the President of the United States went to such and such a church this morning and they had such a powerful Holy Ghost-filled service? Can you imagine that making the news? Ooh. Can you imagine hearing the news and say, oh, the Senate came together this morning and they opened with such a powerful prayer that half of the Congress got saved? Can you imagine hearing that on the news? If it happened, I don't think they would put it on the news. They wouldn't. They probably wouldn't. But can you imagine what it would be like if every mayor, every city council member, every county commissioner, what else goes in there? Mayors, governors, Lord help. What if the governor of every state in the union actually was a Holy Ghost-filled, Christ-following Christian? Some people would pack up and leave the country. They wouldn't live in the state. If the governor of the state got up and testified, oh, I went to a revival the other night. I went to this little church. Something led me to stop, and I went into this church where they were having a revival, and the Holy Ghost broke out, and I went to the altar, and when I came back around, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. But when I looked around, the church was still full. Can you imagine having a governor that said that? But if you go back, when you follow Jesus, that's what you've got, because you're following Jesus, not man. You cannot follow men and expect to make it to heaven. As in Jesus' day, we're facing a crisis of leadership on many fronts, whether it's political, educational, and religious. Ask our students, this is y'all that I'm talking to think about yourself as leaders at home and at work and in the church. What do you expect a leader to be? And then see if you measure up. I don't know where I wrote my little notes at. Here is some of the characteristics, and I thought this is not what I look for in a leader. This is what I looked up. These are not my ideas. These are not original. Characteristics of a good leader: effective communication. They can clearly and consistently explain problems and come up with solutions. Part of being a good leader, effective communications. Most of the time I don't understand what the leaders are saying. I just say, wonder what he meant. Accountability and responsibility. They hold themselves accountable. Think of your leaders right now. Long-term thinking. They're visionaries. They can look ahead and see what needs to be done, and they have a plan to make that happen. Self-motivation. They're able to keep going and to obtain goals despite setbacks. If we tried this and it didn't work, instead of just throwing up your hands and saying we're not going to do it anymore, you come up with another plan and you move forward until you make it to your goal. They have confidence in themselves and their abilities, and you can put your confidence in them as well. They are people-oriented, team players. I hadn't described a leader that I know yet. Not that I know any of them. And then they have emotional stability. They can control their own behavior. Now, does this meet most of our leaders? There's an exception to every rule. Leadership traits refer to the personal qualities that define effective leaders. Leadership refers to the ability of an individual or an organization to guide individuals, to aim them, to keep them going in the right direction towards the fulfillment of the goals and the objectives. These are bad leaders. They're bossy. Too bossy. You ever had a leader they just all they wanted to do was tell you what to do while they sit? That's not a good leader. They're fearful of change. They don't want to see any change. We used to cut up all the time about the fact that some of us, when you get past a certain age, you just don't like change anymore. I used to rearrange the furniture all the time. I can't move it now, but I don't have any desire to do that anymore because I don't like change. I want things to stay where they are because when I move them, I can't find them. I've lost 3 pairs of sunglasses. Finally found one. One pair I never took out of the car. I don't even know what happened to them. I don't remember ever taking them down out of that little thing right there, over there. I always had them in case I went out the door and it was cloudy and suddenly the sun shined. But fearful of change. They're unwilling or unable to communicate effectively. They can't tell you what they want to tell you because they don't have effective communication skills. They're dismissive of other people's ideas, or they'll present an idea as their own when it was actually presented by somebody else. They lack empathy. They're inconsistent. They're prone to blame other people rather than accept your own responsibility, and they're indecisive. You should lead by example. If you go to the Bible and follow Jesus, follow the example that he set, that is a leader that you can follow by example. Now, he led by example. Let me straighten that out. But those were whatever website I went to, I don't remember what it was. I didn't write it down. But whatever that website was, that was their definition of good leadership. And what made a good leader? And I kept thinking, well, it's not fitting most of them. Or most of them don't fit that. Maybe that's the way you should word it. I thought it was funny. I have a warped sense of humor. The depths of deception, question of fatherhood, this is not in the book at all. So it is in John 8:41 through 43. Ye do the deeds of your father. Then said they to him, We be not born of fornication. We have one Father, even God. And Jesus said unto them, If God were your Father, ye would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. Why do ye not understand my speech, even because you cannot hear my word? Much of the debate here between Jesus and these Jewish people centered around the question of fatherhood and who their father was, because, as we say, they claim Abraham as their father. They claimed both Abraham and God as their father. Jesus refuted both claims and pointed to the devil as their real father. The promise to Abraham was that he would be the father of many nations. Historically, Abraham had many natural descendants like the stars of the heaven. The promise, however, was also a spiritual promise. To be a true descendant and heir of Abraham is to share the same faith as Abraham. Abraham is the father of those who trust in God as he did. To believe otherwise is to be deceived. You deceive your own self. Jesus said these Jewish people were disqualified because they did not meet the most important requirement, which was they had to believe in Jesus Christ. They had to believe and love the one whom God had sent. Notice the criterion Jesus has set forth to determine who truthfully has God as a father. It's not carrying out certain acts of devotion to him, nor is it declaring one's love and affection for God the Father. Instead, the emphasis is on love in Jesus. When the Father sent, whom the Father sent. Love for Jesus is paramount if one is to have God as one's Father. We have to have that right relationship with Jesus Christ. You cannot walk away from Christ and still claim to be a child of God. You have to have that relationship with Jesus Christ. John 44 through 53. Most of these are in your book if you want to follow along. Some of them are not. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. And because I tell you the truth, you believe me not. Which of you convinces me of sin? And if I say the truth, why do you not believe me? He that is of God heareth God's words. Ye therefore hear them not, because ye are not of God. Then answered the Jew and said unto him, We say not well, thou art a Samaritan, and hast a devil? Jesus answered, I have not a devil, but I honor my Father, and you do dishonor me. And seek not mine own glory. There is but one that seeketh and judgeth. Verily, verily, I say unto you, if a man keep my saying, he shall never see death. Then said the Jews unto him, Now we know that thou hast a devil. Abraham is dead, and the prophets, and thou sayest, If a man keep my sayings, he shall never taste of death. And art thou greater than our father Abraham, which is dead, and the prophets are dead? Whom makest thou thyself, or who do you think that you are? Basically, what we would say to a person is, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are that you have placed yourself above the prophets, and you placed yourself above Abraham? Jesus did... Just as Jesus boldly pointed out their bondage to sin, he boldly identified his debate partners as children of their fathers, the devil. By doing so, Jesus uncovered the source and the depth of their deception. One, he did this by revealing the reason they wanted to kill him. They were obeying the desire of their father, who was a murderer from the beginning. And their desire to kill Jesus would be fully unmasked by their angry cries, crucify him, crucify him. That will be in John 19 and 6. Second, Jesus also revealed the truth of their deception by unmasking the source behind the lies that they believed. Again, it was their father, the devil, who was a liar and the father of liars. They appeared to believe in Jesus, yet they refused to follow him, rejecting his offer of freedom because they did not consider that they were in bondage. They claimed to be the children of God, but they were the offspring of the devil. They accused Jesus of having a demon, yet they were acting like their father, the devil. And again, here's my statistics from a while ago. Fathers matter. Research has shown that children in a home from which the father is absent account for 71% of high school graduates, 90% of the homeless and runaway children, 63% of youthful suicides are from children that had no father in the home. Fathers are important. Who is the father of the fathers? That is the discussion that people need to have. And then fatherhood itself and how important it is that fathers are in the home to raise their children. Of course, sometimes we don't know who raised the fathers. The faithful son, that is in John 54 and 55. There was one who bore witness to him, Jesus, in the legitimacy of his ministry, God the Father. That's in John 8 and 54. These claims were simply the truth. One either believed what Jesus told them or they did not. Jesus would be a liar like them if he denied his relationship with the Father and his ability to raise the dead. He is pointing out the fact that Abraham wanted to see him. Abraham's desire was to see Jesus. Other prophets in the Old Testament and in the Bible longed to see Jesus. Jesus said, who do you make yourself out to be? Or he's responding to that question. He said, before Abraham was, I am. According to Exodus 3, 13 and 14, God revealed his name to Moses as being I am that I am. This is God's name. This is the way he introduced himself to Moses. Because he is God, the great I am, all that Jesus claimed about himself was true. I am the bread. I am the light of the world. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. This is the way Jesus explained himself. And I think I may have skipped something right there. But anyway, we're finished. I'm only over by a minute, I think. Wasn't that good? I didn't get around to my notes other than part of them. Any questions, any comments? If not, thank you so much for your attendance. Remember, the next time we get together, it's going to be a whole new